Now that we have our special noise, we're going to be combining this as an overlay layer on top of some predefined or some colors for each particular layer that we created before. I am referring to the rocks, the grass, and the sand. So we can create another VOP. And it's similar, the result that I'm looking for is similar to what we get here. When we go here, we go to the scene view. It's similar to this. We'll be creating a textured version of this, a map that's similar to this. We'll pick a color for the grass, we'll pick a color for the rock, and a color for the sand. And this is a texture that we can use then for tinting the textures that we actually going to be using, the tileable textures that we'll be using on the game engine for shading this piece of terrain. So to recreate something like this inside of Cops, again, it's pretty straightforward. Let's start by grabbing each one of the layers. So let's start with the rock, or let's start with the grass. It's probably easier with the grass, and let's pick a color for the grass. So we'll have a parameter, and this parameter is going to be a color. Let's choose color. Let's say grass color. Label, same thing, grass color. Let's pick a color. Let's start with the green, something darker, less saturated, something like this. And let's say this is our grass color. Now, what we'll do is we'll multiply these two. So create a multiply. So we'll multiply the color by the mask. And then we're going to be adding all these layers one to each other. Create an add. And this gives us a vector, and we'll convert vector to float. And we'll connect everything here. Okay, so as you can see, we're starting to build something similar to what we have on the scene view, but here as a texture. Now, this is something that we can replicate, so I'm just gonna copy. I don't really like to replicate parameters. It's kind of my experience. It's kind of dangerous, so I'm just gonna copy this and create another parameter. It's not that hard to do. And for the rock color, I'm going to use, again, this parameter is going to be a color. I'm going to choose something like this. Okay, we'll multiply the rock color with the rock layer, and we'll add to what we already have. And as you can see, everything's working well. Maybe it's a bit too bright. It's better to have it bright. If you're going to use it as a tint, you can tint it any type of blending mode you might choose, but if you're thinking of multiplying, for instance, it's best to have this kind of brighter than darker. So I'm actually gonna leave it like that. Next, we'll again copy these two. Now we're up for the sand. Create a parameter, sand color. Connect it here, add it there. Here we need to change this to color and change the color to something more sandy. Again, I'm going to try to keep it brighter. Maybe not that saturated, but something like this. So we get something pretty similar to what we have on the scene view. And then you can, these parameters will all be available so that you can apply them. Okay, here we have all the colors that we need. We'll also have kind of a multiplier, an extra multiplier. So let's multiply by a constant, or let's just create a multiply here at the end. If in case we need to kind of brighten things up easily, we can just create another parameter here called brightness. And we can just connect it there. Brightness, it's a float, and that way we can, the default value should be 1, and in case we need to increase it, we'll just push that up. Let's go outside. So now you can see that if we have a look at this on the composite view, if we do 1.2, things will get brighter. Okay, so this is a way of just having a quick way of controlling the how bright this is, because the idea is for us to combine this, and the way we're going to combine these is with a composite, and we'll give it one and the other. The order shouldn't be very relevant because we're going to be multiplying them, so we can do multiply. As you can see, it's kind of it's a bit dark. We're going to be tinting one thing with the other, but as you can see, we get, comparing this version with this version, this is pretty completely plain, and this is not completely plain. Of course, we can create a way of controlling the intensity of this. What I'm going to do is actually make a parameter available here, so that we can control, kind of remap what's coming out. So let's go fit range. It's going to be coming from, so this is kind of an intense calculation, so don't be surprised if this kind of goes into calculation mode. And it's coming from 0 to 1, and we wanted to go from, we just want to expose these two, promote parameter and promote parameter. That way, if we think there's too much contrast here, we can say that, let's say it's just going to go all the way down to the minimum value is going to be 0.5, 0.3, and that way we can control how dark it gets, and we can also control how bright it gets. We can actually multiply by something brighter than 1, multiply by 2. That's going to give us this type of contrast. Some areas are getting darker, some areas are getting brighter, and here it's really cool how you can see it almost looks like a layering, looking at rock from above, while the grass, which are flatter areas, don't have as much variation in height, have a different texture. And this is a really interesting way of kind of adding a natural texture, procedural texture on top of the textures that you might choose. So you're still going to be using a grass map, a grass material, and grass textures, rock textures, sand texture. But when you combine these two things, it's going to break up that tiling effect much easier than if you didn't use something like this. If you don't want to use the color, we can also provide an option of exporting, or that's something we're going to be exporting this with the color, but in your material editor, wherever that might be, you will always have the option of desaturating this and just use the value variation to actually create this kind of, add this interesting texture on top of your selected tileable textures. Now we have what we came for, and the way we're gonna be rendering this is by creating a ROP file output. We'll use one for this, and let's call this, I'm gonna keep everything on the same folder. So this is gonna be Alaska A tint. Now I'm gonna change from EXR to TGA. And we need to go to the metadata and just say that we want it unpremultiplied. Okay. We don't want it to take into account the alpha and do something, just leave it as pre-multiplied. And we'll copy this as well here. And this is going to be the material textures or the material layers. I'm going to call this, these are usually referred to as masks. And that's basically it. Now we're going to press render here as well, press render. And let's see if we actually rendered something. Okay, we actually rendered something, but I forgot to include the path to the folder. So just gonna drag this in there. And this is what we rendered out. As you can see, all the information is here. And on the other one, we have the tint, which has this nice texture as well. And this is going to be really useful for us to create a material in the engine. Now I'm just going to fix the path here. Just going to copy this, Control C, Control V slash, and here same thing, Control V slash. Great. So now we have all our maps, our geometry, and our textures. The next step is going to be for us to convert this into an HDA, where we just press a button, we adjust some parameters, and we press a button, and we have we automatically generate all of these. So we're going to be at the press of a button, we're going to be rendering, saving an FBX, baking the normal and the ambient occlusion, and we're also going to be saving out these extra textures. So a lot to cover, and so see you on the next lesson.